Thank you, and thank you, Skip. Kimmel actually kind of stole a little bit of my thunder in his presentation, so I'm really happy he did because no, but no, just kidding. No, I actually do feel a little bit more credible because when I was getting up here to present this, this is one of those things where Kimmel really kind of spoke to where we see the trends in the industry going around content composition, e-delivery, whether it's an on-premise solution, a PSP solution, total solution, or it's somewhere in between. And so I'm going to try to make the argument today that I believe it's probably somewhere in between. So to start off with, though, I wanted to put a cartoon up here that is kind of relevant today because if you stop and read it for a second and then laugh, if you laugh, I know you got it. There we go. How many people deal with this on a daily basis? We just switched to Skype for Business. I swear I deal with this on a daily basis. Is it Lawrence? Lawrence will agree. I'm sure Marion will agree back there too. So I just wanted to kind of put this up, make sure everybody was awake before I move on. As we look at the future, you kind of have to go back into the past. And I go into operations all over the United States, down in Latin America a few times. And just some of the things I was off the top of my head that I still see in our industry. Line data, Metacode, VIP. I actually ran across a group that was folding stuff offline using an old Phillipsburg swing arm inserter. And they had they were reading a 2D barcode with a camera system on it, and they thought that was it. We've come a long way. And when we look at CCM, this was the old CCM strategy back in the day, very disparate, a lot of different solutions, a lot of different point solutions to really solve problems that we were dealing with. Not very organized at all. But today, I believe that the CCM is really more organized. The solutions that are out there are more integratable. And I believe that the challenge is really kind of, if you look at that first slide, security internal becomes a challenge for CCM. It's trying to get the information to our customers in the way that our customers want to see it. So when we look at the CCM strategy, it really kind of encompasses on the outbound side, on-demand printing. Print on demand, batch printing. I mean, that's what a lot of the discussion was around today. There's still a lot of batch printing going. But now we got to deal with online, and now we got to deal with interactive online or interactive correspondence to get information back in from the customer, back into our source systems to then create additional communications going out to our customer. And we want to do it in an organized, efficient manner, no matter what channel they go down. So today's CCM ecosystem, this is really high level, and it kind of matches what Skip said, it matches what Kimmel said. Is really, you got marketing and business users, they want to interact with the content. They want to control it. They want to own it. You got CXM, how do I communicate that information and that content to my end customer? Ricoh's looking at it, we got to communicate that to our customers. We got to provide them that kind of platform, but we also have to know that they're going to be communicating to their customers. A big one, going back to the first slide, compliance and security. Internally, it's becoming harder and harder to do things, get things done because of all the security lockdowns that we have. I go into operations that you can't get on their Wi-Fi, you can't do anything with the thumb drive, you can't, there's so many different rules that trying to get something to show your customers are even hard. Everybody's looking at end user journey. If you think about where we've come when we look at the past, and we were only looking at the print past, but you look at where we came from, most of you guys in here, I remember having an 88 computer. That was my first computer. Now I have a smartphone that does everything for me. My kids don't even know what an 888 is. That's like history lesson. Now that's all they know is smartphones, iPads, the web. So the demographic of what we're trying to communicate to all these different users and get our message out is becoming a challenge. So in user journey, where they want to really kind of get their communication at, that's one of the challenges. And then you have the mix of really trying to deliver that information down to all those different channels. Print being the most challenging because you're taking something that is digital today and converting it into a piece of paper, putting it on an inserter, getting a postal discount, and doing all that stuff. And it's important because people still want that piece of paper. Kimmel here, he gets paper and digital. But it's really about the people and what the people want. And that's your customers or your customers' customers. It's really delivering the communication in a way that really fits their needs. The challenge that we have with that is that everybody does it a little bit different, or we're constrained by our legacy systems that don't allow us to move forward. And I see it all the time. I'm serious. I still see VIP a lot. And that's a challenge when they're saying, we want to take this piece of communication that's going out VIP, and we want to make it a omni-channel, and we want to be able to mobilize it and put it on the mobile and put it on the web and put it on all these different things, and that's where it becomes a challenge. That's where Crawford comes in sometimes. But it's about how we want to really centralize what we're doing, about how we communicate to get our message down to the customer. So what we're seeing in the industry is the definition as a service. And we're seeing more and more of this pop up with some of the customers that Kimmel talked about, some of what Crawford's is talking about today. Ensuring customer experience is providing the journey my customers are expecting. Not what you're expecting, but what your customers are expecting, or your customer's customer if you're a PSP. And how do I deliver all these different channels in a consistent, modern fashion that's providing them the information they need so we can get a response back from them, depending on which industry you're in. And what we're seeing too is that a lot of our customers are coming to us, Ricoh, saying, I don't really have the expertise. I'm not a composition expert. I'm not a print expert. I'm not a omni-channel expert. But I know I need this stuff. And it's not happening in the print center, it's happening at the C-suite level. And they're looking to us to help them guide them down this path a lot of times. And it's small to mid-sized companies and even enterprise companies. How do we get that done? But our environment is becoming more and more challenged from an IT standpoint. We actually would like to outsource that, but not outsource the print. We want to keep the print. We got a nice print center. We want to keep the print in-house. Or we have a PSP that we work with that we want to outsource more to, but we want to streamline it and we want to own the content. So similar to what Kimmel said earlier, there's a struggle in these organizations on what to do and how to go about doing it to get that work out, but still control my content and how I build and output my content for all the different channels. And do I own part of it, or do I outsource the whole thing? And so all these questions are being thrown about inside these organizations, and they're looking for Ricoh and other companies, vendors, to help them answer those questions. So what are your options? One of the things that I like to do is kind of look at the revenue of where the market's going. I went out and looked at a lot of different slides, and I thought this was the best one for cloud computing as a service. And this really includes platform as a service, software as a service, which is really infrastructure, SaaS model, and then infrastructure as a service. And the market from 2014, it was about $12.4 billion. In a very short amount of time, and they had actually data up to 2020 on what the forecast is for 2020, is at $44.2 billion. The growth, the compound annual rate, is going up 21%. That's a huge growth in revenue. That's the money. That's where the rubber meets the road. This is the revenue that these companies think that they're going to generate or are generating based on where the market is going. So if you look at the revenue, cloud computing is really taking a hold in the market, and it's growing. It's growing exponentially. Huh? I can get it for you. I didn't put it on the slide, but I can get it for you. So again, what's kind of driving some of those things? Improving the speed of IT service delivery. You know, IT, on-premise, or even with, some vendors, does take quite some time because they have their own challenges. They have their own internally, enterprise-wide, and we see this at Ricoh too. Everybody has their projects. Everybody's got a bucket of capital out there, and everybody's fighting for that capital for their projects. So, typically the production center gets, kind of the red-headed stepchild sitting at the bottom trying to get and scrape and claw for any capital that they can get for their improvements. Greater flexibility to react to changing market conditions. Again, the market is changing. We've seen in our lifetime huge leaps in technology. And that technology, our kids, and my kids aren't that young anymore. I got a 24-year-old and a 22-year-old. I know I don't look that old. But the point is that they don't, they don't even think about the mail anymore. Everything is electronic that they deal with. So when we even look at, the fact that print's going down, print may never existed in their life because they don't get print. They don't deal with print. They deal strictly digital. We need to have that flexibility for that type of group to get the message out to them because they're the future buyers of America. Of course, with their parents' money a lot of times. Enabling business continuity. I mean, business continuity, disaster recovery, those things that what happens if you're, God forbid, an earthquake or a tornado, or I was just stuck on a cruise ship for 10 days, because of the hurricane down in Fort Lauderdale. God forbid, something happens, and you need your business continuity. So you need to look at other ways of doing disaster recovery than maybe traditionally the print way. Improving customer support or service, replacing proprietary technology. Saving on CapEx, again, we talked about that. As a service, it's an operating expense for the most part. You can capitalize some of the professional services part of it at times, but it's really an operating expense and versus a capital expenditure. That's huge in a lot of enterprise organizations that are fighting for that capital. Reducing resource waste. We have customers that have tons of composition developers. They lose 3 or 4 of those developers because they're retiring or they leave to go somewhere else or whatever. It's tough to find a composition developer. You really kind of have to take somebody that kind of knows it a little bit, maybe a graphic designer, and train them to be composition developers. You take a full-fledged IT person, that's probably not the right person to be a composition developer. And you're going to pay a lot more money for that. Need for real-time information. Again, we talk, big data has been out there for a long time. That's been a buzzword. But it's really, BI and analytics around all that data that's being produced from all these different systems that are communicating out to your customer and communication coming back in. Faster return on investment, that's a huge one. Every C-suite person I talk about, that's probably their major concern. Now, a lot of this other stuff is enterprise-wide, but I tell you what, that CEO and CIO is looking for what's my return on investment. Well, it becomes a bigger return if you're doing it as an operating expense versus a capital expense.
I'm surprised that the product people have done so well.
Yeah, it depends on who you talk to in the organization. You talk about it. If you talk to a CXO, their ranking would probably be a little bit different than a CEO or a CIO. Some of the CIO concerns are probably they'd put some of those things up at the top, or they may even take improving the speed of IT service delivery. They'd probably put that down lower. Well, that's not that important. But it is. All this,
Question, Michael. What are the metrics that they're tracking? Does the business have a good idea when they say faster time to market? Are they actually tracking that, or does that have a feel good?
No, they're actually tracking the data. It's based on surveys that were taken from this particular one, and I can get you a source of this information as well.
I know there's some surveys. Are the business people actually tracking that, or is it kind of?
I'm not.
I think it's faster, but I don't have any metrics to prove
Well, I think I think there are metrics. I think through a lot of the BI tools that are tracking this information inside the enterprises, we're seeing a lot more of that data come out from those type of systems. But it's a larger enterprise customers versus small to mid-sized customers that can actually have time to track and leverage the technology they have. But it's good information, but it also makes you stop and think and say, yeah, these are some of the challenges that we have, and I'm sure everybody in this room will, something on here hit a nerve because you're dealing with it, So SaaS and EBP solutions, when we look at service systems, and this is I just kind of like this flow slide, but what they're looking for is how can we take marketing and business users, have them interact with content as a service, build their content, self-service, but also work with the service provider to actually help do the composition, write the business rules, do that heavy lifting that actually creates that content, but do it in a way that allows them to really push that to an omni-channel type solution. Or, if I have legacy output, how can I take legacy output in and convert that into an e-presentment and payment solution using some of the same methodologies? How can I incorporate preference management into my solution? Because I need to know how my customers want to get their information delivered. And I know I'm on the camera, I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep pushing towards him. I need email, SMS, IVR, web presentment. They're looking for payment, and they want you to be fully integrated into the payment services. They're looking for social media, mobile apps. I even got a customer that's looking at how can they, think about, and they're actually helping you, develop some of these services internally, because they'll be like, my customer, my healthcare customer comes into my office, and they whip out their medical ID card, and what do? I take that ID card, go over to the copier, I scan it, and send it to my email. What if you just had your ID card on the cell phone and you just send it to their email? Or better yet, you send it in the format that provider needs it. Because a lot of electronic a lot of health records are moving to electronic. So everything has to be electronic. So there's different ways that different companies are looking at how to use the technology out there, no matter what. But the biggest thing is, and again, to your point, how do I get the data out of all this? How do I know if this is working? How do I know how my customers are choosing what preference, And so all this information goes into a data warehouse. And as a service, business intelligence gets analyzed, and then reporting gets passed back to the customer so they know what's going on inside as each one of these transactions go through the system. So this is a true as-a-service type solution that's really integrated and taking in all the different channels based on preferences to push it to the electronic multi-channel or even pushing out print. Really depends on where depends on what that customer wants to do. So when you kind of look at it, you also got to focus on and worry about, hey, because I got print, I'm going to have to do CAS and NCOA. I need to get that postal discount. That's a huge cost savings. So I got to maintain that. I got to keep up with postal and now all the postal rules and regulations. So you got to build all these. So if you're building an integrated system, either on-premise or as a service, these are some of the things that you need to think about. Now the question is do you want all this stuff as a service, or can I do some of it as an on-premise, and can I do some of it as a service, and what part is my, if I'm going to send my print to a PSP or going to send my digital output to a PSP because they're providing that information or that service for me, I also got to think about that as well. Let me keep moving on. So what we're seeing in the market is a trend for what we call hosted solution, and Kim will mention that. And where the hosted solution is where we're buying a piece of software, let's just say it's a composition tool. And we want to take that composition tool and we want to actually host it and do the platform as a service or infrastructure as a service to where we're buying that piece of software and we're putting it on somebody else's environment to host it for us. And oh, by the way, We want that hosting platform to have development services to help us develop in that application potentially. Help us with the data. A lot of times, crap in, crap out. I heard that earlier. The data that's coming in, how can we convert that or transform that into usable data? And oh, by the way, we want to send you ASCII data, pipe delimited data, XML data, JSON. We want to send it all to you. So you got to be able to have those capabilities in your hosted solution. So when you're looking at that, but let's just say it's just composition. You want a composition, you want somebody to host it for you, and we're seeing that. I'm working with a bank right now that has basically said, I got 3 composition tools. None of them are doing exactly what I want. Here's the one I want, but my IT is so backlogged, and we're outsourcing our IT just to get additional services for IT that I can't even think about doing anything with this. But I'm sitting on a $2.6 million savings by eliminating all the other composition tools, but I need to host this in somebody's environment. Can you help me? This is a real life example. And so, but they're saying, well, but we want to keep the print in-house. We want to keep sending it to our printer and take advantage of the investment that we already made until we're ready for that next phase, which potentially could be outsourcing it to a PSP. So, but we don't know which PSP it is, so we want to be agnostic. We want to be able to produce any type of output for whatever PSP we go with. So we can provide them with a streamlined file so they can process it and move it down the path. We're also seeing things that are hosted, but it's really kind of a hybrid. So, and this is where you're really working with your composition software partners to say, hey, you know what? And this is a real life scenario. It's a utility that said, you know what? I got these composition developers. We love our composition developers. We want to actually do the composition. We want to build either the WFD or the pub file, but we don't really want to run it on our system. We want to pass that WFD or pub file over to you. You run it on your rendering engine. And oh, by the way, I want to take advantage of other services that you may have. And we're seeing a lot of that. That's just with the utility. And it's actually a pretty large utility. We're also seeing that in the insurance space as well, where they're saying, you know what? We want you to do the composition. You pass the WFD or pub file over to us, and we'll run it on our rendering engine because we don't want our data to leave our environment. So this way, they get composition as a service, but we're only building the application, putting it on their infrastructure. They have a rendering engine. They spin it, run it against their composition or ICM, and they produce the output, and it's printing on their sites. Their data never leaves their environment. Again, it's providing all these different ways of taking these services and kind of creating a custom solution for these customers that get them into the future a lot faster. I have one customer in an insurance company in Indianapolis, being I'm from IU, or I went to school at IU, that said, you know what? I'm outsourcing this big, large file today. I have my own production center. I want to bring that back in-house. The problem is I don't have a composition tool. We want to do something as a service for now, but then later buy the composition tool and take it back in-house. How flexible can your services be around that? So we're getting all these questions from all these different customers, and believe me, I'm in hundreds of customers a year, seeing hundreds of different ways of doing this from a consulting and PS standpoint. And these are real life scenarios that are going on and questions that are being asked to where the people are saying we want to do this. It's not data and really it's splitting the service for composition, content management away from the traditional print as print as a service.
Can you explain to you why they want to bring it back in-house?
Part of it is control. Part of it is something that you said, it's the agnostic of, if I send it to, and I'm just being honest, if I send it to a PSP, I'm locked into that PSP. Every time I move from PSP to PSP, I got to rebuild it. I got that cost to rebuild it if I move it. So what I tend to do is stay with the PSP. Now, if the PSP is a great service provider, like CSG, then I'm sure it's not a problem. But these are the things that the customers are saying to us. And, you know, I mean, that's how they feel. The challenge that they have is, I was in a medical company in Arizona who wanted to bring composition back. They were actually outsourced to a very, very large PSP, and they wanted to bring their stuff back in-house. They wanted to control, and it was actually driven by marketing. Of course, they really didn't have IT on board. They really kind of should have looked at a service provider to do that service, but was agnostic from the PSP to accomplish the goal that they were trying to accomplish. But, you know, at the end of the day, they brought it back in, and they fell. They spent $500,000 on a composition tool, and they went down that path. But internally, they haven't sold it internally. So it became a big political mess, and they ended up never really accomplishing what they were trying to accomplish.
I call that, it's the illusion of control, right?
Yeah.
It's control theater, like TSA. It's the illusion of control.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the challenge with that one. So, you know, there's a lot of different use cases of why people are doing this, but when you're in the field and you're talking to these customers and they're struggling, you know, because they're an insurance company or they're a utility or their core business is not print mail, you know, or their core business is not delivering stuff electronically. You know, when you talk to them about omni-channel, it's a great concept, but they don't know how to get there. They don't know how to wrap their brain around it. So that's where the service, you know, what we call as a service, we're starting to see a lot of traction in the industry for that, because there are people in those industries that are experts and subject matter experts at that. And, you know, Kimmel made a comment earlier about Ricoh not wanting to suppress print. I think the attitude in Ricoh is changing, because it's not our decision whether we want to suppress print or not. Those decisions are being made by the enterprise, by corporations, and they're going to do it whether we want them to or not.
I'm thinking more of Boulder Ricoh.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm Boulder Ricoh too. So, but anyway, so you know, some of the things that you have to consider when you're looking at why do I do something on premise, or why do I do it as a service, or maybe, you know, obviously we talked about CapEx versus OpEx. We talked about the IT portion of it. We talked about all the things that you have to think about, the delivery channels, workflow integration, which, you know, we heard Crawford talk about that today, and really tying those pieces together. So whether you build, you look at it as a service, or you outsource the whole thing, and then, I mean, it's really based on your CCM strategy and where you want to take it. Do you want to have more control? Do you want to give some of that control away to actually move towards the future? Do you want to give even more control away, depending on which direction you really want to go? You know, it really depends as a corporation or enterprise which direction you want to go. But I think that we're just scratching on the future, and the things that we're seeing in the market, the things that we're seeing some of our partners do, are really setting up for even more things coming in the future that's going to create more challenges for us. I'm excited to say, you know, Ricoh is looking at all these different things that can help our customers move towards the future. And so the question is outsourcing your CCM a good idea? I would say that I would really, you know, as part of your strategy, I think you got to look at, does it make sense for me to keep it in-house? Does it make sense for me to keep parts of it in-house and outsource some of it? Does it make sense for me to outsource, you know, parts of it here and parts of it there, like my CCM strategy for content composition as a service, host it, or as a complete service, or do I outsource it all to my service provider? I mean, all these are really good questions that you kind of have to sit back and kind of think, is this something I really, really want to do, and how do I want to go about doing it? So that's it. Any questions other than the ones I already got? Now, I have my 15 to, I think I'm giving some time back, but I have my 15 minutes here later, so when I come up, I'm not going to have a PowerPoint presentation, I swear to God. No more PowerPoint presentations for me. But I am going to do a little demo for you guys on something that we think is really cool. So, cool.